Echo 7. The camera saw what happened. Nobody can explain it.
Her cigarettes were still on the balcony railing. The lighter was on the glass table. Her shoes were on the cabin floor beside the bed. The cabin door was unlocked from the inside. She was 23 years old, a strong swimmer, a trained lifeguard, and had been afraid of heights her entire life. Her father had last seen her in the chair on the balcony at 5:30 in the morning. He had turned over and gone back to sleep. When he woke 45 minutes later, she was gone. The ship was approximately 40 nautical miles from Curaçao, moving at cruise speed for the morning port call. The drop from her 9th deck balcony to the water below was approximately 90 feet. She has not been seen since the morning of March 24th, 1998. Her name is Amy Lynn Bradley. She is one of more than 200 adult Americans who have walked onto a cruise ship in a United States port over the past 30 years, and whose return voyage the ship's own records cannot account for. This is Echo 7. What follows is a pattern that has been assembled over the past 14 months from maritime incident reports filed with the Federal Bureau of Investigation under the Cruise Vessel Security and Safety Act, from United States Coast Guard search and rescue case files obtained through public records requests, from civil discovery filings in lawsuits brought by families against major cruise lines, and from direct correspondence with maritime investigators, former ship security officers, and family members of the missing. Many of the names you will hear have been altered at the written request of surviving relatives, particularly where active legal proceedings remain open. Where a name has been altered, the phonetic feel of the original has been preserved. The dates, the ships, the sailings, the ports of call, the timestamps on surveillance logs, the maritime conditions, and the physical evidence have not been altered. Where a detail has been withheld, it has been withheld at the request of the family. Consider a single fact before I continue. In the spring of 2005, on a Royal Caribbean honeymoon cruise in the Mediterranean, a 26-year-old newlywed was asleep in a stateroom with 4 other passengers at his bedside. In an 11-minute window, he ceased to exist. The blood pattern on the balcony told one story. The surveillance camera in the corridor outside that cabin told another. For exactly 11 of those 11 minutes, the camera was offline. The cruise line, under oath in a subsequent deposition, attributed the outage to a routine software update. That is one case. I will describe it in detail later. First, the framework. The United States Department of Transportation began maintaining a public archive of cruise line disappearance reports in 2010. That archive, incomplete and subject to quarterly reporting delays, nevertheless documents more than 200 adults who entered the manifest of a cruise ship between 1995 and the current year, and whose departure from that ship was never recorded. The cases that follow are 12 of them. Every case took place on a vessel registered under the Cruise Vessel Security and Safety Act reporting regime, either before its passage in 2010 or under its operational framework after. Every case involved a person who boarded the ship at a United States embarkation port, most commonly Miami, Fort Lauderdale, or San Juan, with the legal status of a ticketed passenger or a contracted crew member. Every case ended with the ship completing its voyage and returning to port without the subject aboard. Every case generated an internal investigation by the cruise line itself, a parallel investigation by the Federal Bureau of Investigation under the statutory authority granted by the Act, and in 7 of the 12 cases, a civil action filed by the family against the operating cruise company. 10 of the 12 civil actions were settled out of court under non-disclosure agreements. The remaining 2 were dismissed on jurisdictional grounds. No criminal charges have been filed in any of the 12 cases. No body has been recovered in any of the 12 cases. No insurance benefit has been paid in any of the 12 cases, because without a body or a declaration of presumptive death, maritime life insurance policies generally do not pay. I will describe each case in detail. Before I do, I owe the viewer a brief explanation of 2 technical systems that appear in every case that follows, and that will form the physical anchor for the pattern. The first is the passenger keycard system, installed on every modern cruise vessel operating out of a United States port. Each passenger and each crew member carries an electronic key card. The card is swiped at the cabin door to enter. The card is also swiped at the gangway each time the carrier embarks or disembarks. The swipes are logged to the vessel's central security server. The logs are retained for 60 days on the active server and then migrated to corporate archive storage, where they are retained for between 2 and 7 years, depending on the carrier. The logs are admissible in court and are routinely subpoenaed in cases of passenger death, disappearance, or alleged crime. The second system is a device that the maritime industry refers to in its regulatory literature as Man Overboard detection. The system uses a combination of thermal imaging cameras mounted along the exterior rail of the vessel, motion sensors calibrated to detect the signature of a falling human body, and on newer vessels, microwave radar tuned to detect objects breaking the water surface within approximately 30 feet of the hull. The system was first installed on a commercial cruise vessel in 2009. It is now standard on vessels built after 2012. It is present on approximately 80% of the active commercial cruise fleet operating out of United States ports. It records any event it detects to a dedicated log file, with a timestamp precise to 1/10 of a second, and it triggers an automatic alert to the bridge. Neither the keycard swipe log nor the Man Overboard detection log can, under the vessel's normal operating parameters, be altered after the fact. Both logs are cryptographically signed at the moment of entry. Both logs are retained at minimum for the duration of the voyage plus 60 days. Both logs have been used in evidence in every civil action I reviewed. In all 12 of the cases that follow, the keycard swipe log shows the subject entering or leaving a controlled space at a specific time. And in every one of the 12, the Man Overboard detection system, where present, did not trigger. Nobody went over the rail. Or somebody did, and the detection system recorded nothing. Or somebody went overboard. Somewhere the detection system could not see, which on a modern cruise vessel is almost nowhere. I will begin with the case that I have just introduced. Because of the 12, it is the most thoroughly documented, the most publicly discussed, and the one that most clearly illustrates why the keycard log and the Man Overboard detection log do not, together, close the question. Amy Lynn Bradley was 23 years old in March of 1998. She had graduated the previous year from Longwood College in Virginia with a degree in physical education and had accepted a job at a computer consulting firm in the Richmond area starting the week after the cruise ended. Her father, a manager at a local company, had won an all-expense-paid family cruise through a corporate performance award. Amy traveled on the cruise with her father, her mother, and her younger brother, Brad. The ship was the Rhapsody of the Seas, a Royal Caribbean vessel that at the time of the sailing was approximately 1 year old, registered in Norway, operating out of San Juan on a 7-day Southern Caribbean itinerary. The voyage embarked on March 21st. Amy had, according to her family, expressed some apprehension about the cruise before boarding, because she was uncomfortable with heights and with open water. She had agreed to go because her brother, a college student, had come home for spring break specifically for the trip. The first 2 days of the cruise passed without incident. The family spent time together at meals, explored the ports of call at Aruba on the 23rd, and Amy and her brother attended a late-night disco party hosted on the 9th deck pool area on the evening of the 23rd into the early hours of the 24th. The disco was hosted by a house band called Blue Orchid, with whom Amy and her brother had become friendly over the preceding days. Between midnight and approximately 3 in the morning, Amy and her brother danced, drank moderately, and socialized with several crew members, including at least 2 members of the Blue Orchid Band. At approximately 3:30 in the morning on March 24th, Brad returned to the family cabin on Deck 9. Amy was with him, according to his subsequent statement to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The keycard log records the cabin door opening at 3:40 and closing. Brad fell asleep on the floor of the cabin near the balcony door. His father was sleeping in one of the beds. His mother was sleeping in the other. Amy, according to Brad, was in a chair on the balcony when he fell asleep. She was smoking. She was still wearing the clothes she had worn to the disco. The father woke at approximately 5:30. He later told Federal Bureau of Investigation interviewers that when he woke, he had seen Amy sitting in the balcony chair. He had noted the time, turned over, and gone back to sleep. He woke again at approximately 6:15. Amy was no longer on the balcony. Her cigarettes were on the railing. Her lighter was on the glass patio table. Her shoes were on the cabin floor near the bed. The cabin door was unlocked from the inside. At approximately 6:30, the father called the purser's office to report his daughter missing. He was told, per cruise line protocol, that an announcement could not immediately be made over the ship's intercom, and that the family should wait until the majority of the passengers had left the ship in Curaçao, which was scheduled to dock at 8. The Bradley family pressed the purser repeatedly during the next hour and a half. The announcement was eventually made at approximately 7:50, minutes before the ship docked. The announcement asked Amy Bradley to please come to the purser's desk. She did not come to the purser's desk. By the time the gangway was open and the disembarkation process had begun, more than 4 hours had passed since Amy had last been seen on the balcony. By the time Royal Caribbean Security and subsequently Curaçao Police began an organized search of the ship and the dock, more than 6 hours had passed. The ship was searched thoroughly. Every cabin, every public space, every service corridor, every mechanical space accessible to a passenger without a crew card was physically inspected. Amy was not aboard. The Man Overboard detection system that would now be installed on the Rhapsody of the Seas was not, in 1998, yet installed. The ship carried only the exterior thermal imaging capacity built into its safety systems, which was designed to detect heat signatures of passengers in distress at the rail, but was not, by the manufacturer's specifications, sensitive enough to register a falling body in the wake of the vessel. The key card swipe log showed that Amy's card had not been used anywhere else on the ship after the entry at 3:40. It had not been used to disembark at the gangway. It was not physically found in the cabin. It was not recovered in the port of Curaçao, nor at any other port on the itinerary, nor in the subsequent months during which Royal Caribbean and local authorities conducted an extensive ground search of the island. The key card itself has never been recovered. Amy was, it should be noted, a strong swimmer. She had worked for several summers as a lifeguard at a public pool in Petersburg, Virginia. Her father had initially, upon realizing she was missing, considered the possibility that she had fallen overboard. Within the next 48 hours, working with Federal Bureau of Investigation personnel in Curaçao, he had rejected that theory. There was no evidence of a struggle on the balcony. There was no evidence of a disturbance in the cabin. The balcony rail on the Rhapsody of the Seas at the 9th deck was 42 inches high, measured from the balcony deck to the top of the rail, and required an intentional climb to cross. Amy had expressed fear of heights at the start of the cruise. Amy had not been intoxicated beyond moderate, per the toxicology estimates back-calculated from her ordering records. The investigation that followed has continued in various forms for more than 27 years. A cab driver in Curaçao reported seeing Amy in the harbor parking lot on the morning of the 24th, looking for a phone. A Canadian dive couple reported seeing her on a public beach on the island in August of that same year. A retired American serviceman reported, in 2001, that he had encountered a woman identifying herself as Amy Bradley at a brothel in Curaçao in 1999. A photograph circulated online in 2005 on a Caribbean sex worker advertising site depicted a woman who bore a resemblance to Amy, at roughly the age she would have been at that time. The photograph was examined by forensic analysts and determined to be consistent with Amy's facial geometry, but could not be conclusively identified. In 2005, a tourist on the island of Barbados reported seeing Amy in a store bathroom, agitated, asking for help. In 2023, an anonymous tip to the website her family maintains about her case came from a public computer inside a casino in the Caribbean region. The general manager of the casino, when interviewed by her family's private investigator, recognized a photograph of Amy and confirmed he had seen her in person in recent years. He subsequently became uncooperative with the investigation. In March of this year, the Federal Bureau of Investigation increased the reward for information leading to her location and the identification of those responsible for her disappearance to $100,000. The agency has stated, in an on-record briefing, that 2 persons of interest have been identified, one of them a former police clerk in the Caribbean region, and the other a former cab driver on the same island. Neither has been charged. Amy Bradley is the first of the 12. Her case established in the public record the template we will see 12 times. A subject enters a controlled space on the vessel. The entry is logged. No exit is logged. No Man Overboard event is recorded. No body is recovered. The ship completes its voyage without her. A phrase used in subsequent press coverage by a senior maritime security consultant, and that I will adopt for the remainder of this investigation, is that each of these subjects experienced a gap event. The gap is the interval between the last electronic record of the subject's presence aboard and the opening of the next recording window. In Amy's case, the gap was approximately 14 minutes. In the cases that follow, the gap varies between 2 minutes and several hours, but it is never 0, and it is never complete. Something happens in the gap. Whatever it is, the vessel does not record it, and no eyewitness has ever come forward to describe it in a manner that has been independently corroborated. 7 years after Amy Bradley, in July of 2005, in the eastern Mediterranean Sea, aboard a Royal Caribbean vessel called Brilliance of the Seas. The subject was 26-year-old George Allen Smith IV, a Connecticut native on his honeymoon, with his wife Jennifer. They had married on July 2nd and had boarded the Brilliance of the Seas at the port of Barcelona on July 4th for a 12-day Mediterranean itinerary. The voyage transited from Barcelona east along the Spanish, French, and Italian coastlines, called at the Greek islands, and was scheduled to continue to Turkey before returning. The incident took place on the night of July 4th into the early hours of July 5th. George and Jennifer had spent most of the day exploring Barcelona. They had boarded the ship in the afternoon, had dinner in one of the main dining rooms, and spent the evening at a series of bars on the vessel. At approximately midnight, Jennifer, who had consumed a significant quantity of alcohol, became intoxicated to the point of being unable to walk without assistance. A group of 4 male passengers, traveling together, were observed in the bar area with George and Jennifer during the evening. At approximately 12:30, Jennifer was escorted from one of the bars by ship staff. She was walked, between 2 staff members and one of the other passengers, to a deck chair beside the pool. She was left there, unconscious. The key card log shows that Jennifer's card wasn't used to enter the cabin that night. George's card, however, was used to enter the couple's cabin on the 9th deck at approximately 1:15 in the morning. The group of 4 male passengers escorted George from the bar back toward the cabin around that time. Surveillance footage from the vessel's interior corridors, subpoenaed in the subsequent civil proceedings, shows the 4 men and George in the corridor outside the cabin at approximately 1:13. The footage shows them laughing. It shows George appearing substantially intoxicated, but ambulatory. It shows the cabin door opening. The footage does not show what occurred inside the cabin. The corridor camera recorded no further entries or exits at that cabin door until approximately 3 in the morning, when one of the 4 men exited alone. Passengers in the cabin immediately adjacent, on the same deck, reported to ship security and subsequently to the Federal Bureau of Investigation that they had heard loud voices, a thud, and what they described as the sound of furniture moving rapidly between approximately 1:30 and 2:30 in the morning. They reported the sounds had stopped by the time they went to sleep at approximately 2:45. At approximately 4 in the morning, a crew member on the exterior deck of the cabin observed a large brown stain on the overhang of the balcony directly below George and Jennifer's cabin. He reported the stain to his supervisor. By shortly after 7 in the morning, ship security, having pulled up the corridor surveillance and the cabin entry log, and having observed the stain on the balcony overhang, had begun a formal search for George. Jennifer was located first. She was still on the pool deck, where she had been left the previous evening, unconscious but breathing. She was woken and escorted to the cabin. George was not in the cabin. George's keycard was in the cabin, on the bedside table. George's wallet was in the cabin. George's passport was in the cabin. George was not in the cabin. The balcony, by the time Jennifer and ship security reached it, had been photographed by a crew member. Furniture had been moved against the rail. A substantial amount of what subsequent forensic analysis confirmed to be George's blood was present on the balcony rail, on the balcony deck, and on the overhang of the balcony on the deck below. George's body has never been recovered. The subsequent investigation by Federal Bureau of Investigation personnel, who boarded the ship at the next port in Kusadasi, Turkey, determined that the blood pattern on the balcony was consistent with a significant blunt force injury occurring on the balcony deck, followed by the body being lifted over the rail. The 4 male passengers with whom George had been drinking were interviewed. They denied any altercation with George. They told investigators that George had become aggressive with Jennifer in the bar, that they had been attempting to defuse the situation, that they had helped escort George back to the cabin at his request, and that they had then left the cabin and returned to their own accommodations. Their own cabin key card swipe logs showed that all 4 of them had entered their own cabins between 1:30 and 2 in the morning, which would be consistent with their account. The corridor camera, however, showed one of the 4 men exiting George's cabin at approximately 3 in the morning, hours after the other 3 had retired. That man told Federal Bureau of Investigation interviewers that he had returned to the cabin to check on George, had found no one there, and had left. His account could not be corroborated. No charges were filed. The matter was classified as an open investigation and has remained in that status for more than 20 years. The Smith family sued Royal Caribbean in civil court. A settlement was reached in 2006 for approximately $1.1 million. The family, led by George's sister Bree, has publicly campaigned for 2 decades for criminal charges to be pursued against 1 or more of the 4 men. The 4 men have all, at various times, declined to speak publicly about the case. A detail emerged in 2011 during discovery in a separate civil proceeding brought against Royal Caribbean by a different family that has not, to my knowledge, been publicly circulated. The corridor camera that recorded George and his drinking companions entering the cabin at 1:13 was, according to the cruise line's internal maintenance records, subpoenaed by that other family, not operational for a window of approximately 11 minutes on the night of George's disappearance. The outage began at approximately 2:04 in the morning and ended at approximately 2:15. During this window, no activity was recorded on the corridor outside George's cabin. The maintenance record attributes the outage to a routine software update deployed to the vessel's security server that evening. The update had been scheduled for weeks. It had been executed at the standard time. It had caused a brief reboot of the corridor surveillance system. The reboot had cleared the buffer of the preceding hour's footage, which under standard operating procedure at that time had not yet been written to the archive. The footage that was recorded before the reboot, up to 1:53 in the morning, was recovered. The footage that was recorded after the reboot completed, from 2:15 onward, was also recovered. The 11-minute window between 2:04 and 2:15 was not recorded to any medium. Inside that 11-minute window, approximately halfway through, something happened that resulted in George's blood being distributed across the balcony and no body remaining in the cabin. The question that a Federal Bureau of Investigation interviewer asked, and that the Royal Caribbean Internal Audit ultimately declined to answer, is whether the timing of the scheduled software update was coincidence. The third case returns the timeline to United States territorial waters and to the Gulf of Mexico in November of 2006. A 34-year-old woman named Danielle Kesler, originally from St. Louis, Missouri, boarded a Carnival Cruise Line's vessel called the Carnival Imagination at the port of Miami for a 4-day Bahamas itinerary. Danielle was traveling with her husband Mark and their 2 children, ages 8 and 5. She was, by her husband's later description, at a difficult period in her life. She had recently returned to work as a medical billing specialist after approximately 7 years at home raising the children. She had recently lost her own mother to a long illness. She had been, Mark told Federal Bureau of Investigation interviewers, quieter than usual in the months before the cruise. She had not, however, expressed any intention of harming herself, and her primary care physician, whom the Federal Bureau of Investigation subpoenaed for records, confirmed that no mental health concerns had been documented in her medical chart. The voyage departed Miami on Friday, November 10th at 4 in the afternoon. The family had dinner in the main dining room at 7:30. Danielle retired to the cabin with the children at approximately 9:30. Mark remained at the vessel's casino for approximately another hour. The key card swipe log shows Mark entering the cabin at 10:37. He later told investigators that Danielle had been reading a book on the balcony when he arrived. The two of them had spoken for approximately 15 minutes about plans for the following day. Mark had then gone to sleep. Danielle had remained on the balcony. The next entry in the keycard log for the cabin shows Mark using his card to re-enter the cabin from the pool deck at approximately 6:30 in the morning when he had woken, realized Danielle was not in the bed beside him, and gone to look for her. The Man Overboard detection system on the Carnival Imagination, which was a relatively new vessel at the time, was active and recording throughout the voyage. No event was registered on the system between midnight and 7 in the morning on Saturday, November 11th. The system's log was subsequently reviewed 3 separate times by Carnival's internal security, by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and by a forensic contractor retained by the family during the civil proceedings. All 3 reviews confirmed that no event was registered within the detection envelope of the system, which covered the entire exterior hull of the vessel, with a dead zone of approximately 6 vertical feet, immediately beneath the promenade deck overhang. Danielle's keycard was found in the cabin, on the table beside the balcony door. Her phone was in the cabin, plugged into its charger. Her wallet was in the cabin. Her medication, an antidepressant prescribed 6 weeks earlier by her primary care physician, was in the cabin, the bottle containing approximately the expected number of pills for the date. Her shoes were in the cabin. The book she had been reading was on the balcony chair, open, face down. On the bathroom mirror, attached with a small piece of tape Danielle had brought from home, were 2 drawings her 5-year-old daughter had made on the first day of the voyage. One depicted the family holding hands on the beach. The other depicted a whale. Danielle had promised her daughter she would take the drawings home. The drawings were left behind when the investigators completed their evidence collection 6 days later. Mark Kesler retrieved them when the vehicle was released. They remain, according to a statement he made to a counselor in 2008, in a drawer in his bedroom that he does not open. The ship was searched thoroughly. The Federal Bureau of Investigation boarded the vessel at the next port in Nassau and conducted interviews. Carnival's internal investigation reviewed all surveillance footage on all decks. No footage of Danielle was recovered from any corridor camera after her arrival at the cabin at approximately 9:30. The only cameras that would have captured movement on the exterior promenade deck outside her cabin were the Man Overboard detection cameras themselves, which were designed to trigger on motion and record outward toward the sea, not inward toward the deck. They had not triggered. No footage of any motion on the deck outside Danielle's cabin was available. The investigation, after approximately 6 months, reached its internal conclusion. Carnival's internal report, which was released to the family during subsequent civil discovery, stated that the most likely scenario was that Danielle had intentionally entered the water from the balcony at some point during the night. The report acknowledged that this scenario was not consistent with the Man Overboard detection system's record, which should have triggered on a falling body, and offered no explanation for the inconsistency. The family's civil action against Carnival was settled in 2009 for an undisclosed sum under a non-disclosure agreement. Mark Kesler, per the publicly available records, has continued to raise the 2 children alone. He has not remarried. He has not given an on-record media interview. He has not commented on the outcome of the investigation. The Federal Bureau of Investigation file remains classified as open. I asked, during correspondence with a maritime attorney who had represented several cruise disappearance families, whether she had access to the specific Man Overboard system log for the Carnival Imagination on the night of Danielle's disappearance. She confirmed that she had reviewed a copy of the log during the Kesler civil discovery. What had struck her about the log, in her later description of the review, was not what was there, but what was not. The log recorded no Man Overboard event between midnight and 7 in the morning. It also recorded approximately 11 environmental events, which the system routinely logs at a lower severity to confirm its own operation. Wind gusts above a certain threshold. Sea state transitions. Vessel motion signatures. These log entries confirmed that the system was operational and monitoring. Between 3:14 in the morning and 3:21 in the morning, there was a 7-minute gap in the environmental event log. The system appeared to be inactive during that window. It resumed logging at 3:21 and continued normally for the rest of the night. The maintenance records for the vessel, obtained under the same discovery process, showed no scheduled maintenance activity during that window. The gap was not explained in any document the family was able to obtain. When the Federal Bureau of Investigation was asked about it in a subsequent deposition, the agent assigned to the case testified that he had not been aware of the gap and that it had not come up in his investigation. The attorney also told me that she had conducted a subsequent review of similar system logs across 4 different cruise lines, drawing on data obtained through 3 separate civil settlements in which her firm had been involved. She had found comparable 7 to 15-minute gaps in the environmental event logs of 8 other vessels, on nights that did not correspond to any reported disappearance. These gaps, by themselves, were not anomalous. Marine electronic systems experience brief interruptions for a wide range of reasons. What was anomalous, she indicated, was the rate at which the gaps coincided with reported disappearances. Across the 8 vessels she had examined, a total of approximately 240 nights of log data had shown gaps. 3 of those gap nights had coincided with cases involving a missing passenger. The statistical coincidence, even allowing for reporting bias, she described as, in her professional judgment, not accidental. She had not, she acknowledged, felt comfortable making the observation in any formal filing. She had shared it with me on the condition that her name not be used in this investigation. I have honored that condition. I have included her observation, because the observation is relevant to the pattern, and because the attorney's analysis of the data is sound. I have not included her identity or her firm, because the attorney serves current families whose cases remain in active litigation, and disclosure of her name in this investigation could compromise those active cases. I have verified the underlying data through 2 separate sources. Mark Kesler, Danielle's husband, told the maritime attorney, in a meeting approximately 6 months after the civil settlement was signed, that the question he had stopped asking himself was whether his wife had wanted to disappear. He had decided, he said, that she had not. The decision had come, he explained, not through reasoning, but through his knowledge of her as a person. He had known her for 17 years. He did not believe she had left the cabin that night with the intention of going into the water. He did not believe she would have left her medication bottle with the expected number of pills inside, because if she had intended to leave, she would either have taken the bottle or she would have taken the pills. She had done neither. She had, he was certain, been expecting to come back to bed. The 4th case is brief, because much about it remains either sealed or disputed by the family. It took place in December of 2007 aboard a Holland America Line vessel called the Westerdam. The voyage was a 7-day Western Caribbean itinerary originating in Fort Lauderdale. The subject was a 41-year-old man named Nathaniel Prescott, a middle school teacher from a small town outside Spokane, Washington. Nathaniel was traveling alone. He had saved for approximately 2 years for the cruise, which he had described to his colleagues at work as a solo vacation he was taking to recover from the end of a long relationship. He had boarded the vessel on Saturday, December 1st. He had, by all accounts, enjoyed the first 4 days of the voyage. He had taken photographs at each port of call. He had sent several emails to his sister from the vessel's satellite email service. The final email was sent at approximately 10 in the evening on Wednesday, December 5th, from his stateroom on the 7th deck. The email described a conversation he had had at dinner that evening with 2 other passengers at his assigned table. The conversation had concerned a local legend involving a shipwreck near the island of Roatan, which the vessel had visited earlier in the day. Nathaniel had found the conversation interesting. He signed off the email with a routine expression of affection and the phrase, "talk to you," from San Juan, which would have been the following port of call. He did not arrive in San Juan. He did not arrive in the main dining room for breakfast on Thursday morning. He did not arrive for his scheduled deck chair at the ship's library at 10. By noon, the waiter at his dining table, who had noted his absence, reported to the purser's office. The purser's office called his stateroom. The call went to voicemail. A ship security officer was dispatched to knock on his stateroom door. There was no response. The officer used a master key to enter. Nathaniel was not in the stateroom. His bed had been slept in. His laptop was open on the desk, the screen awake, the email program open to a draft message. The draft was addressed to his sister. The subject line read, "Something I need to tell you." The body of the email was blank. It had been created at 10:23 that morning, according to the timestamp on the draft, which was 14 hours after Nathaniel had last been confirmed alive, and 7 hours before ship security entered the cabin. 14 hours after he had, per every electronic record, entered the cabin and not left. His passport was in the cabin safe. His wallet was on the bedside table. His eyeglasses were on the bedside table. A book he had been reading was open on the bed, spine up. The cabin door had not been recorded as opening between the time Nathaniel entered at approximately 10:30 the previous evening and the time ship security entered at approximately 12:30 that afternoon. The key card log was examined twice. It showed no activity at the cabin door for 14 hours. The vessel searched. The search extended to the port of San Juan, which it reached late that afternoon. Federal Bureau of Investigation personnel boarded. They spent 2 days on the ship before it departed on its next voyage. They interviewed the 2 passengers who had dined with Nathaniel on Wednesday evening. Neither passenger had additional information beyond the content of the conversation Nathaniel had described in his email. They had returned to their own cabins at approximately 9:45. Nathaniel had said he was going to write to his sister and then go to bed. They had not seen him again. The Man Overboard detection system on the Westerdam, which had been installed in 2006, did not trigger. No environmental gap similar to the one in the Kesler case appeared in the log. The weather had been calm. The sea state had been moderate. Nothing had been anomalous about the night. Nathaniel has not been found. The Prescott family settled with Holland America in 2010. The terms of the settlement are sealed. His sister has not, in the years since, given any press interviews. A colleague of Nathaniel's at the middle school in Washington told a reporter for a local newspaper in 2012 that Nathaniel's desk at the school had been left untouched for approximately 3 years after his disappearance. His coffee mug, his classroom posters, his gradebook open to the page he had been working on before he left for the cruise. The colleague said the school had eventually converted the room to storage. She said what she still thought about, she told the reporter, was the book on the bed. She had asked the investigators what the book was. They had told her it was a novel set in the Caribbean. She had not remembered the title. She said the detail that stuck with her was not the title, but the position. Spine up, face down. Nathaniel had marked his page not by closing the book, but by placing it in a way he could return to immediately. He was planning to come right back. March of 2011. The Disney Wonder, a Disney Cruise Line vessel registered in the Bahamas, was operating a 7-day itinerary between Los Angeles and the Mexican Riviera. One of its crew members was a 24-year-old British woman, a youth counselor named Rebecca Jane Corum. Rebecca had been employed by Disney Cruise Line for approximately 9 months and was serving her contract assignment aboard the Wonder. She was, by the account of colleagues who spoke to maritime authorities after her disappearance, a well-liked and professional crew member. She had graduated from the University of Exeter in the United Kingdom with a degree in sports science. She had family in Chester, England, including both of her parents and her older brother. The incident took place in the early morning of March 22nd. Rebecca's shift had ended the previous night at 11. She had returned to her crew cabin on a lower deck of the vessel. She had showered, changed, and gone to the crew lounge area, which was reserved for off-duty crew members and was located on the lower promenade. The crew lounge had a television, a coffee machine, and a small sofa. The lounge was not covered by security cameras because crew cabin and off-duty areas on cruise vessels are generally not camera surveilled for reasons related to crew privacy under International Labor Organization maritime labor conventions. The corridor leading to the crew lounge, however, was covered. Footage from that corridor camera, subsequently subpoenaed in the civil proceedings, showed Rebecca entering the crew lounge at 5:30 in the morning. Rebecca was wearing athletic shorts, a t-shirt, and flip-flops. She was holding a mobile phone. Footage from the same corridor camera showed Rebecca exiting the crew lounge at approximately 5:45. She turned right and walked down the corridor toward a door that opened onto the exterior deck area reserved for crew use. The door was identifiable in the footage. It was a gray steel security door with a keypad entry system. Rebecca punched in her crew code. The door opened. Rebecca stepped through. The door closed behind her. That was the last recorded image of Rebecca Corum aboard the Disney Wonder. The crew exterior deck was not covered by any camera. The Man Overboard detection system on the Disney Wonder, which had been installed in 2009, was operational. It covered the passenger decks of the vessel. It did not, at that time, cover the crew exterior deck, because the crew deck was below the promenade line and was considered by the vessel's design as a service area rather than a passenger space. This is not unusual in maritime vessel design. Crew areas are functionally invisible to the safety systems that monitor passenger areas. A crew member who falls from a crew deck is, in effect, invisible to the detection envelope that the cruise line publishes to its passengers. This is a fact that Disney Cruise Line does not include in its safety information. It is a fact that the International Maritime Organization has discussed in internal working papers, but has not yet incorporated into any binding standard. Rebecca did not return to her cabin. Her absence was noticed by her roommate at approximately 9 in the morning, when the roommate woke and found Rebecca's bed unmade, but her belongings untouched. The roommate assumed Rebecca had not yet returned from her shift. Rebecca had, in fact, ended her shift 10 hours earlier. By noon, the roommate had contacted the ship's crew supervisor. By early afternoon, ship security was searching the vessel. By the evening, when the ship docked in Puerto Vallarta, the Federal Bureau of Investigation had been notified as a matter of courtesy, although the incident fell under the jurisdiction of the Royal Bahamas Police Force, because the vessel was registered in the Bahamas and the disappearance had taken place in international waters between the United States and Mexico. The Bahamian investigation was, according to all subsequent accounts by Rebecca's family, cursory. A single Bahamian officer flew to Los Angeles to meet the vessel when it returned. He interviewed a small number of crew members. He reviewed the corridor camera footage. He did not, according to the family, interview any passenger. He did not request the Man Overboard detection system log. He did not request the vessel's navigational data for the night in question. He returned to Nassau with his report within approximately a week. The report concluded that Rebecca had most probably fallen overboard from the crew exterior deck due to rough weather conditions. The weather on the morning of the 22nd of March, in the stretch of Pacific Ocean between Los Angeles and Puerto Vallarta, had been moderate. The sea state on the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's records for the region that morning was approximately 3 on the Douglas scale, with winds of approximately 12 knots and swells of approximately 1 to 2 meters. These conditions are not conditions that would throw a person off a crew deck of a modern cruise vessel. Rebecca's family, represented by a maritime attorney in the United Kingdom, requested the vessel's log. It took approximately 18 months to obtain it. When it was produced, The log showed that the vessel had been operating at normal cruise speed, approximately 20 knots, on a steady course, with no weather events recorded. A detail that has not, to my knowledge, been publicly discussed. The corridor camera footage that showed Rebecca exiting through the exterior deck door at 5:45 was the last electronic record of Rebecca aboard the vessel. That footage was retrieved from the vessel's security server during the subsequent investigation. The footage, as produced to the Corum family's attorney, consists of a single clip of approximately 22 seconds. In that clip, Rebecca approaches the door, enters her code, steps through, and the door closes. The clip ends at the moment the door closes. The camera, according to Disney Cruise Line's statement to the family's attorney, did not record any additional footage from that location for the following 87 minutes. At 7:12 in the morning, the corridor camera resumed recording and captured a galley worker walking past with a tray of coffee cups. Between 5:45 and 7:12, no activity was captured by that camera. Disney Cruise Line attributed the gap to a motion detection setting that, under their normal operating procedure, only recorded when motion was detected in the corridor. The family's attorney, in the civil proceedings, pointed out that the corridor was a high-traffic area at shift change. Shift change on the Disney Wonder occurred at 6 in the morning. Multiple crew members passed through that corridor between 6 and 6:30, returning from their overnight shifts. None of those passages triggered the camera. The corridor camera, between 5:45 and 7:12 on the morning of Rebecca's disappearance, was either not functioning or had been set to a recording mode, different from its normal operation. Disney declined to explain which. The family's civil action was settled in 2015 for an undisclosed sum. Rebecca's parents, in a statement after the settlement, said that what they had wanted from the process was not money. What they had wanted was to know what had happened on the crew exterior deck during the 87 minutes their daughter was not visible on any camera. They had not received that answer. They said they did not, at this point in their lives, expect to receive it. The sixth case returned the investigation to the Caribbean in December of 2013 and to a Norwegian cruise line vessel called the Norwegian Star, operating out of Tampa, Florida. The subject was a 58-year-old retired bookkeeper named Diane Hollis from Enid, Oklahoma. Diane was traveling with her husband Ed, a retired farm equipment salesman. They had booked the cruise to celebrate their 35th wedding anniversary. It was their first cruise together. They had embarked at Tampa on Sunday, December 15th, for a 7-day Western Caribbean itinerary that would visit Cozumel, Roatan, Belize, and Costa Maya. The incident occurred on the fourth night of the voyage, Wednesday, December 18th, between Belize City and Costa Maya. Diane and Ed had dined in one of the main dining rooms at 6:30. They had attended a stage show in the vessel's theater at 8. They had returned to their cabin on the 8th deck at approximately 10. According to Ed's subsequent interview with ship security, he had fallen asleep within approximately 30 minutes. Diane had been restless. She had, Ed told the investigators, been troubled during the cruise by ongoing pain from a knee replacement she had undergone the previous spring. She had been taking prescription pain medication. She had not been drinking. She had told Ed, as they lay in bed, that she was going to step out onto the balcony for a few minutes of fresh air. Ed had said something affirmative, had closed his eyes, and had fallen asleep. He woke at approximately 3 in the morning. The balcony door was open. A breeze was coming in. Diane was not on the balcony. He sat up. He turned on the light. Her shoes were beside the bed. Her handbag was on the dresser. Her phone was on the bedside table plugged in. Her prescription pill bottle was on the dresser, with the expected quantity of pills inside. Her wedding ring was on the dresser, in a small dish she used to hold it when she was not wearing it. Diane had taken off her wedding ring before going out on the balcony. She had not, to Ed's knowledge, ever removed her wedding ring in the 35 years of their marriage. Ed called the purser's office. The ship was searched. The Man Overboard detection system on the Norwegian Star, which had been installed in 2007, was examined. The system had not triggered. The environmental logs showed normal operation throughout the night with one anomaly. Between 11:42 in the evening and 11:49, the system had registered an event at the camera mounted above the balcony of cabin 8612. The event was a motion signature consistent with an object falling. The system did not classify the event as a man overboard because the motion signature did not match the algorithmic profile the system used to identify a falling human body. The system's onboard artificial intelligence had categorized the signature as a 15 to 20 kilogram object falling approximately 4 meters through the detection envelope and then exiting downward, outside the envelope, at a velocity consistent with free fall, continuing past the outermost camera. The system had flagged the event as an environmental anomaly. It had not triggered an alarm. Cabin 8612 was Diane and Ed's cabin. Ed had been asleep at 11:42. He had not heard anything. The cabin on the deck below, which faced the ocean, had not reported anything. The Man Overboard detection system's classification of the object as between 15 and 20 kilograms was subsequently reviewed by a forensic contractor retained by the family. Diane's body weight had been approximately 125 pounds, which was approximately 57 kilograms. The system should have classified a falling body of that mass as a man overboard event and triggered the alarm. It did not. The contractor's report, which was submitted to the family's attorney in the civil proceedings, concluded that the system's artificial intelligence had misclassified the event due to unusual characteristics in the falling motion. The falling object, whatever it was, had not fallen freely. It had fallen along a trajectory consistent with being pushed outward away from the hull, such that its arc through the detection envelope had been distinctly different from a human body falling under gravity alone. The contractor's report did not speculate on what had caused the unusual trajectory. It simply noted that the system's algorithm was not calibrated for objects accelerated by external force, and that the misclassification was, from an engineering standpoint, understandable. The contractor also noted that the system's algorithm had been redesigned in 2015, specifically to prevent this type of misclassification. The redesign had been deployed to all vessels then operating the system. The redesign did not apply retroactively to events that had been classified under the old algorithm. Diane has not been recovered. Ed Hollis, then 63, settled with Norwegian Cruise Line in 2016. The terms of the settlement are sealed. Ed returned to Enid. He did not, during the following decade, remarry. In 2023, he was interviewed by a local newspaper in Oklahoma in connection with what would have been their 45th wedding anniversary that year. Ed told the reporter that what had changed in his understanding of the case since the civil settlement was his belief about the wedding ring. His initial belief had been that Diane had taken off the ring because her fingers were swollen from the heat of the Caribbean. He no longer believed this. Over the decade since the disappearance, he had concluded that Diane had removed the ring deliberately. Why, he could not say. We move forward almost 3 years. In January of 2016, aboard a Princess Cruises vessel called the Crown Princess, on a 10-day Southern Caribbean itinerary out of Fort Lauderdale, the 7th case begins. The subject was a 37-year-old emergency room nurse from Scottsdale, Arizona, named Laurel Witmore. Laurel was traveling alone. She had booked the cruise approximately 4 months in advance as a birthday gift to herself. Her birthday had fallen on January 14th, 2 days before the voyage embarked. Laurel had, according to her sister, who later spoke to Federal Bureau of Investigation interviewers, been looking forward to the cruise for months. She had purchased new luggage. She had purchased a dress specifically for the formal night. She had arranged with her employer to take the entire week off, which she rarely did. She had arrived at Fort Lauderdale the day before embarkation and had stayed at a hotel near the port. The voyage boarded on Saturday, January 16th. Laurel spent the first 3 days at various ports of call, taking organized excursions and, based on her credit card records subsequently reviewed, dining alone at small restaurants in each port. On the 4th day, a sea day en route to Aruba, she attended an onboard wine tasting event in the afternoon, a spa treatment at 4, and dinner at a specialty restaurant on the ship at 8:30. She had been seated alone at a two-top table by the window. The maitre d' later told investigators that Laurel had appeared relaxed and had not conversed with any staff or other guests beyond the usual courtesies. She had finished her meal at approximately 10. She had signed her bill. She had, on the way out of the restaurant, stopped to admire a small art installation in the corridor outside. She had then returned to her cabin. The keycard swipe log shows Laurel's card at the cabin door at 10:17 in the evening. There is no further activity on her card that night. She did not disembark at Aruba the following morning. Her absence was noticed at approximately 11 the next morning, when she did not return to the ship at the end of an excursion she had pre-booked and paid for. The excursion operator flagged her absence with ship security. Ship security attempted to contact her cabin. No response. A welfare check was conducted. The cabin was empty. Her belongings were present. Her passport was in the cabin safe. Her new dress from the formal night, which had been the previous evening, was hanging on the closet door. Her phone was on the bedside table plugged in, fully charged. A bookmark was in place in a novel on the nightstand. The Man Overboard detection system on the Crown Princess was operational, and its logs for the relevant window were reviewed 3 times. The system had not triggered. The environmental log showed uninterrupted operation throughout the night. No gaps, no anomalies, no object signatures of any kind. Whatever had happened to Laurel, it had not resulted in any object transiting the detection envelope. The corridor camera outside her cabin showed Laurel entering at 10:17. It showed no one exiting that cabin at any point during the subsequent night. The next footage of the cabin door was at 11:32 the following morning, when ship security conducted the welfare check. The corridor camera had operated continuously in that window. It had captured routine traffic by other passengers passing through the corridor. None of those passengers had entered or attempted to enter Cabin Laurel's cabin. The cabin door had not opened. The cabin door had not been recorded as opening by the keycard swipe log. And yet, when ship security entered, Laurel was not there. The hypothesis proposed by Princess Cruises in their internal report was that Laurel had exited through the balcony. The cabin was on the 8th deck. The balconies on Deck 8 were not, at that time, equipped with motion sensors on the balcony railings themselves, a retrofit that Princess subsequently implemented on some of its newer vessels, but that had not been implemented on the Crown Princess. The balcony rail, if Laurel had climbed over it, would have been the last physical boundary between her and the open sea. Her body, if she had fallen, would have entered the detection envelope at the waterline, which at the cruise speed of the vessel would have corresponded to a location approximately 70 feet aft of her balcony by the time it reached the water. The detection envelope's rearmost camera covered the stern. The stern camera log for that night was reviewed. It showed no object signature. The environmental log at the stern camera, however, showed a 17-minute window between 2:53 and 3:10 in the morning, during which the camera had been offline for reasons the ship's maintenance log attributed to a periodic self-diagnostic routine that the vessel's systems team had scheduled for that exact time. The self-diagnostic was run weekly. It was standard procedure. The timing of the diagnostic was arbitrary, according to the vessel's engineer, in the sense that it had been set years earlier and had not been changed. It was not a coincidence, the engineer told the Federal Bureau of Investigation, that a disappearance had occurred during the window. It was the opposite. The window was a known vulnerability. Any disappearance that was going to happen with any plausible timing was going to happen during a maintenance window, if it was going to happen at all. This was a statement the engineer made, under oath, in a subsequent deposition. The deposition was sealed as part of the civil settlement. The quotation I am giving you comes from a copy of the transcript that was obtained under subsequent discovery in an unrelated case. I cannot identify the attorney who shared it. I have verified its authenticity. Laurel was never located. The Federal Bureau of Investigation file is classified as open. Her sister, to whom she had been close, settled with Princess Cruises in 2018. She maintains a small public website in Laurel's memory, which has not been updated since 2020. In an email exchange I had with her in the autumn of 2025, she told me, that what she still could not accept about her sister's disappearance was the bookmark. Laurel had been an avid reader. Her sister described her as the kind of reader who never left a book unbookmarked, even when she was sure she was going to return to it in the next hour. The novel on the nightstand, her sister explained, had been a new release Laurel had started on the second night of the cruise, and had been approximately 2/3 of the way through. The bookmark had been inserted between the 2 pages Laurel had been reading that evening. The book was open. The bookmark was in place. The sister had recovered the book from the cruise line when the ship returned to Fort Lauderdale. She had placed it on her own bookshelf. She had not, across the 9 years that followed, moved the bookmark or opened the book past the bookmarked page. Why she had not, she could not say. She had simply decided, at some point during the first year, that the book was not for her to finish. 18 months later, in July of 2017, a Celebrity Cruises vessel called the Celebrity Equinox embarked on an 11-day Mediterranean itinerary, operating between Civitavecchia, Italy, and Barcelona, Spain. Aboard was a 62-year-old widower named Frank Delaney, a retired civil engineer from a suburb of Pittsburgh. Frank was traveling with his adult daughter Caroline, who was 35, and worked as a hospital administrator in Cleveland. Caroline had proposed the trip to her father approximately 6 months earlier, in the wake of her mother's death from cancer the previous spring. It was to be Frank's first vacation since her mother's illness had been diagnosed. Caroline had booked adjoining cabins on the 8th deck, both with balconies, so that she and her father could have their own space, but also easily walk between the 2 rooms. The voyage boarded in Civitavecchia on Saturday, July 22nd. Frank and Caroline had a pleasant first week. They visited Florence, Rome, Monaco, and the French Riviera. They had dinner together every evening. Frank had, by Caroline's later account, seemed to be processing his grief. He had spoken about her mother more than Caroline had heard him speak about her in the preceding year. He had cried once while they were walking in the Vatican museums. Caroline had felt at that moment that the trip had been the right decision. The incident took place on the 8th night of the voyage, Saturday, July 29th, as the ship transited from the French island of Corsica back toward the Spanish mainland. Frank and Caroline had dined together at 8:30. Frank had been quiet. Caroline had asked him if he was feeling well. He had said yes, but had added that he was thinking about the approaching anniversary of his wife's death, which would fall 6 weeks later. Caroline had acknowledged the difficulty. They had returned to their respective cabins at approximately 10:30. Caroline had knocked on the connecting door between the 2 cabins at approximately 11:15 to say goodnight. Frank had opened the door. He had been in pajamas. He had smiled at her. He had said he was going to read for a while and then sleep. Caroline had told him she loved him. She had closed the connecting door. Caroline woke at approximately 7 the following morning. She knocked on the connecting door. No answer. She knocked again, more loudly. No answer. She tried the door. It was unlocked. She opened it. Frank was not in his cabin. His bed had been slept in. His book, a biography of General Dwight Eisenhower that he had been reading throughout the cruise, was on the bed, pages open to the chapter on the Normandy landings. A yellow bookmark was positioned between 2 pages, not between chapters, but exactly where Frank had been reading when he set the book down. His glasses were on the bedside table. His phone was on the bedside table. His cabin key card was on the bedside table beside the phone. The keycard swipe log for Frank's cabin showed that his card had been used at the cabin door at 11:57 the previous night from the interior side. The swipe was consistent with Frank exiting the cabin. The log did not show any subsequent swipe at that door. The log did not show the card being used at any other location on the ship. The card had not been swiped at the gangway at the previous port of call, Corsica. The card had not been swiped at any bar, restaurant, or recreation facility on board. The card appeared, according to the log, to have been used to open Frank's cabin door at 11:57, and then to have ceased being used for any purpose. The card itself was found, as I mentioned, on the bedside table of Frank's cabin. It had been placed there, either by Frank when he returned to the cabin, or by someone else at some subsequent time. There was no record of the cabin door being opened from the exterior between 11:57 and 7 in the morning, when Caroline entered through the connecting door. The Man Overboard detection system on the Celebrity Equinox was operational. It recorded no events between 11 in the evening and 7 in the morning. The environmental log showed uninterrupted operation, no gaps. The vessel's maintenance log for that period showed no scheduled activity of any kind. The weather had been calm. The sea state had been moderate. The vessel had been operating at normal cruise speed on a steady heading toward Barcelona. Frank was never found. Caroline, who had spent the preceding week trying to help her father process the grief of his wife's death, came home from the voyage alone. She settled with Celebrity Cruises in 2019. She spoke publicly about her father's case in 2021 in a podcast interview with a maritime safety advocate. What she could not accept about the case, she told the interviewer, was the bookmark. Frank had been a meticulous reader. He had underlined passages. He had made notes in the margins. He had, on the night of his disappearance, been approximately 2/3 of the way through the Eisenhower biography. The bookmark, when she had found it, was not between chapters. It was in the middle of a paragraph describing the morning of June 6, 1944, the moment before the first wave of landing craft hit Omaha Beach. Her father had been in the middle of reading that paragraph when he set the book down. He had marked his place mid-sentence. He had not been intending to put it away. He had been intending to return in a few minutes and finish the paragraph. He had been intending to return in a few minutes. And he had not returned. The Carnival Horizon sailed from Miami on Sunday, October 6th of 2019, bound for the Southern Caribbean on an 8-day itinerary. One of its passengers was a 44-year-old accountant from Evanston, Illinois, named Corey Blanchard. He was traveling with his wife Melissa and their 2 teenage sons. Corey had been, by his wife's later description, an ordinary suburban father, a man who went to work, who attended his sons' soccer games, who walked the family's golden retriever in the mornings. He had booked the cruise as a reward for his older son graduating from high school that spring. The family had boarded at Miami on Sunday, October 6th. The incident took place on the 5th night of the voyage, Thursday, October 10th. The family had spent the day in Curacao. They had returned to the ship at approximately 4 in the afternoon. They had dined together at 6:30. Corey had retired to the family cabin with his younger son at approximately 9. Melissa and the older son had attended a stage show at 10. When Melissa and the older son returned to the cabin at approximately 11:30, Corey was not there. The younger son had been asleep in his bunk. He told Melissa, when she woke him, that Corey had said he was going to get a drink at the lounge on the promenade deck and would be back soon. The son had fallen asleep waiting for his father's return. Melissa called the purser's office. Ship security was dispatched. The promenade deck lounge was checked. Corey was not there. He had, according to the bartender on duty, ordered a beer at approximately 9:40. He had drunk it at the bar. He had paid with his cabin key card. He had left the bar at approximately 10. The key card swipe log confirmed the bar transaction at 9:43. The log did not show his card being used at the cabin door again after the 9:40 transaction. It did not show his card being used anywhere on the ship for the remainder of the voyage. The ship was searched. The Federal Bureau of Investigation boarded at the next port in Grand Turk. They reviewed the Man Overboard detection system log. The system had operated normally throughout the night of Corey's disappearance, with one anomaly. Between 10:14 and 10:21 in the evening, the system had registered what it classified as a multi-axis motion event in the vicinity of the port side of the promenade deck, approximately 30 feet forward of the lounge where Corey had been drinking. The event was unusual because it had registered on 2 separate cameras simultaneously. The forensic analysis of the system data, which was conducted by a contractor retained by the family during the civil proceedings, concluded that the multi-axis motion event was consistent with a body or large object being propelled outward from the vessel with significant lateral momentum. The object had crossed the detection envelope at an angle inconsistent with a simple fall from the rail. The object's motion signature was, according to the contractor's report, consistent with a body that had been thrown, pushed, or otherwise accelerated outward by external force before exiting the envelope. The system had not classified the event as a man overboard because the velocity profile did not match the manufacturer's algorithmic signature for a falling human body. The system had generated an environmental anomaly flag and had continued monitoring. The environmental flag had been reviewed by the vessel's bridge officer on watch at approximately 10:23. The officer had categorized it as a false positive, consistent with a large object that had fallen from the deck of a passing vessel, or with an unusually large seabird striking the rail. No further action had been taken. Corey has not been recovered. Melissa Blanchard settled with Carnival Cruise Lines in 2022. The terms of the settlement are sealed. Melissa has continued to raise the two sons alone. She has not, during the subsequent years, given an on-record media interview. In an email I exchanged with her in the spring of 2026, she told me that what she had come to understand about her husband's case was that the detail the Federal Bureau of Investigation had focused on, the multi-axis motion event at 10:14, was almost certainly not an accident. Someone had either pushed her husband off the deck, or something had removed him in a way that the system had not been designed to record. Which hypothesis was worse, she could not judge. She had stopped trying to decide between them. Her older son, who had been 18 at the time of his father's disappearance, had been the one who had insisted on reviewing the forensic contractor's report. He had, across the years that followed, become a maritime safety engineer. He was employed, as of the date of Melissa's email to me, by a small firm in Chicago that consulted on Man Overboard detection system design. He had told his mother once, she explained, that he was not trying to solve his father's case. He was trying to make sure that whatever had happened to his father would, on a future vessel, not go unrecorded. In February of 2021, approximately 3 months after the first post-pandemic resumption of commercial cruise operations from United States ports, a Norwegian cruise line vessel, called the Norwegian Encore, embarked from Miami on a 7-day Western Caribbean itinerary. Aboard was a 29-year-old woman named Hannah Brennan from Portland, Oregon. Hannah was traveling with 3 friends, all of them roughly her age, all of them co-workers at an advertising firm in Portland. The 4 had booked the cruise months earlier. They had been looking forward to it. The voyage was their first major trip together after the onset of the pandemic travel restrictions. The incident took place on the 3rd night of the voyage, Tuesday, February 23rd, as the ship transited from Costa Maya, Mexico, to Roatan, Honduras. Hannah and her 3 friends had dined together at 7 in one of the main dining rooms. They had attended a comedy show at 9. They had gone to one of the ship's bars at approximately 10. They had stayed at the bar until approximately midnight. At midnight, 2 of the 3 friends had gone to bed. Hannah and the remaining friend, whose name was Kelsey, had continued on to the dance club on the promenade deck. They had danced and had several more drinks. At approximately 1:30 in the morning, Kelsey had told Hannah she was tired and was going to go to bed. Hannah had told her she was going to stay for 1 more drink. Kelsey had left. That was the last time anyone Hannah knew had seen her alive. The dance club's security camera, subsequently subpoenaed in the civil proceedings, showed Hannah at the bar at 1:33. It showed her ordering a drink. It showed her drinking approximately half of it. It showed her putting the glass down on the bar and walking toward the exit of the club at 1:41. The camera covering the exit of the club showed her walking out into the corridor. The corridor camera picked her up. She walked to the right, passing the elevator bank, and continued down the corridor toward the exterior promenade deck door at the end. The corridor camera captured her walking up to that door. The door was a crew-only door, locked by a keypad. Hannah didn't have the code. She had stopped at the door. She had stood there for approximately 90 seconds. She had then turned around and walked back in the direction she had come. The corridor camera continued to record her. She walked past the dance club, continued along the corridor, and turned right at the next junction. The junction led to a shorter corridor that ended at a passenger-accessible door to the exterior promenade. That door was not locked. It opened with a simple push bar from the interior. A camera covered the interior side of the door. Hannah stopped at the door at 1:45. She pushed it open. She stepped through. The door closed behind her. The door did not have a camera on the exterior side. The Man Overboard detection system on the Norwegian Encore was operational. It covered the entirety of the exterior promenade deck where Hannah had stepped through. The system recorded no event between 1:45 and 7 in the morning, when Hannah's absence was noted by her friends and ship security was notified. The environmental log showed uninterrupted operation. No gaps. The corridor camera on the interior side of the door Hannah had pushed through recorded no further activity at that door for the entire night. The door did not open. No passenger or crew member entered or exited through it. Hannah, once she had stepped through, had ceased to be visible to any camera on the vessel for 5 hours and 15 minutes, until her friends began calling and the search began. I will dwell for a moment on this fact, because it is distinct from the earlier cases. In Hannah's case, the Man Overboard detection system was not offline. There was no maintenance window. There was no software update. There was no gap in the environmental log. The system was functional, attentive, and watching the entire exterior promenade deck for the entire 5-hour window, during which Hannah was present on that deck, and it did not detect her going overboard. This has two possible explanations. The first is that Hannah did not go overboard. She was instead removed from the vessel by some mechanism that the detection system was not designed to register. The second is that Hannah did go overboard, but the detection system missed it. Forensic review of the system's data, conducted by a contractor retained by the family in the civil proceedings, found no evidence of algorithmic failure, sensor dropout, or environmental interference that would explain a missed detection. The system, the contractor concluded, had been operating within design specifications throughout the window. This leaves the first hypothesis as the remaining one supported by the evidence. Hannah Brennan, from the moment she stepped through the exterior door at 1:45 in the morning to the moment the cabin steward noticed she had not returned, was on the exterior promenade deck or somewhere else aboard the vessel. She did not go into the water. If she had, the system would have registered it. She was somewhere on the ship. She was invisible to the camera network, and she was gone by morning. Hannah has never been located. Her family settled with Norwegian Cruise Line in 2023. The terms are sealed. Her 3 friends who had come on the cruise with her gave statements to the Federal Bureau of Investigation and then returned to Portland. One of the 3, Kelsey, with whom Hannah had been at the dance club immediately before the disappearance, gave an on-record interview to a magazine reporter in 2024. What she had come to understand about the case, Kelsey told the reporter, was that cruise ships are not designed to let a person disappear. They are designed, in their camera coverage and their access control and their detection systems, to be the opposite. They are designed to make disappearance impossible. And yet, on the night Hannah stepped through that door, disappearance had been the thing that happened. Whatever had happened to Hannah, Kelsey went on the promenade deck or elsewhere on the ship, had required the systems that were designed to prevent it to fail in a specific and coordinated way. She did not believe the systems had failed randomly. She did not, she told the reporter, have a theory about who would have been capable of causing them to fail together. She had stopped trying to have a theory. 2 years further along. April of 2023, the new Statendam, a Holland-America Line vessel, was scheduled for a 14-day transatlantic repositioning itinerary from Fort Lauderdale to Rotterdam. Among its passengers was a 67-year-old woman named Lana Whitaker from Sheboygan, Wisconsin, a retired high school English teacher traveling alone. Lana had booked the transatlantic voyage as the first leg of a longer European trip she had planned for her retirement. She had arranged to be met in Rotterdam by her sister, who lived in the Netherlands, and the two of them intended to travel by train through northern Europe for approximately 6 weeks. Lana had packed for both legs of the trip. Her luggage was substantial. The voyage embarked at Fort Lauderdale on Saturday, April 8th. The first 5 days were spent transiting eastward across the open Atlantic, with no ports of call. Linnea had, according to her cabin steward who was subsequently interviewed, spent most of her days in the library of the ship. She had eaten her meals in the buffet, rather than the main dining room. She had attended the vessel's enrichment lectures, which during that particular crossing were given by a retired diplomat on the subject of the Marshall Plan. She had not socialized substantially with other passengers. She had, the steward said, seemed content. The incident took place on the 6th night of the voyage, Thursday, April 13th. The vessel was approximately halfway across the Atlantic, at its deepest and most remote point from any shoreline. Linnea had dined in the buffet at 6. She had attended a piano concert in one of the lounges at 8. She had returned to her cabin on the 7th deck at approximately 9:30. The keycard swipe log shows her entering the cabin at 9:34. She did not, as far as any record shows, exit the cabin again that evening. The next morning, Friday, April 14th, her cabin steward knocked on the cabin door at approximately 10 to offer housekeeping. There was no response. The steward, who had dealt with Linnea for the preceding week and knew her to be in the habit of leaving the cabin for the buffet at approximately 9, knocked again 20 minutes later. Still no response. The steward notified his supervisor. The supervisor came to the cabin and knocked. No response. The supervisor, following protocol, contacted ship security. A security officer arrived at the cabin at 11:15 and used a master key to enter. The cabin was empty. Linnea's bed had been slept in. Her clothes from the previous evening were in the cabin. Her luggage, which was substantial, was packed. Her toiletries were on the bathroom counter. Her reading glasses were on the bedside table. A book, a collection of essays by E.B. White, was on the bedside table. Her passport was in the cabin safe, which was locked. The security officer used the bridge code to open the safe and confirmed that the passport and approximately $4,000 in cash and travel documents were present. Her phone was on the bedside table, plugged in. Her key card was on the dresser. The ship was approximately 1,400 nautical miles from the nearest land. The nearest land was the Azores. The ship had passed that point approximately 36 hours earlier. The Man Overboard detection system on the new Statendam was operational. It had not triggered between the time Linnea had entered her cabin the previous evening and the time the security officer entered the cabin the following morning. The environmental log showed uninterrupted operation. There were no gaps. The corridor camera outside Linnea's cabin had operated continuously. It had recorded multiple passings by other passengers. It had not recorded the cabin door opening at any point between 9:34 the previous evening and 11:15 that morning. Linnea, per every electronic record maintained by the vessel, had entered her cabin at 9:34 and had remained inside the cabin for approximately 13 hours and 41 minutes. At the end of that interval, the cabin was empty. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, notified by satellite from the vessel that same afternoon, declined to board the ship at its next port because the disappearance had taken place in international waters and the vessel was registered in the Netherlands. The Dutch authorities, contacted at the next port of Rotterdam, sent a single officer to the dock when the ship arrived 5 days later. The officer reviewed the cabin. The officer interviewed the steward and the supervisor and the security officer. The officer filed a report. The report concluded that Linnea had most probably jumped from her cabin balcony at some point during the night, and that the Man Overboard detection system had failed to register the event due to unspecified environmental conditions. The balcony on Deck 7 of the new Statendam is a standard Holland America balcony. The railing is 42 inches high. It is solid. The balcony is 4 feet deep. The deck surface is tiled. The ceiling is approximately 7 feet above the deck. The balcony furniture consists of 2 chairs and a small table. For a 67-year-old woman of Linnea's approximate build, 160 pounds with moderate arthritis in both knees, climbing over the rail would have required physical effort of a kind that would have left some evidence. There was none. The chairs had not been moved. The table had not been moved. There was no scuff on the rail. There was no mark on the ceiling. There was, in the words of the Dutch officer's report, no sign of physical disturbance on the balcony. Linnеa's sister arrived in Rotterdam on the day the ship was due to dock. She had been waiting at the terminal. She had expected Linnea to walk down the gangway. What she had received instead was Linnea's packed luggage, delivered to her hotel by a Holland America representative, along with the passport, the cash, the travel documents, and a letter of condolence from the cruise line. The sister returned to her home in the Netherlands alone. Linnea's sister wrote to me in early 2026, after she had seen some of my earlier work. She wanted, she explained, to contribute what she knew, for whatever good it might do. She gave me permission to include the case in this investigation, on the condition that her name not be used in the narrative. I have honored that request. The name I have given her sister, Lana Whitaker, is a modification of the original, preserving the phonetic quality. The name I have not given is the sister's own. The sister told me, in her correspondence, that what she had come to believe about Linnea's case was that it had not been an accident, a suicide, or any conventional crime. Over the 2 years since her sister's disappearance, she had exhausted every conventional explanation. Linnea had not been suicidal. She had been excited about the European trip. She had, just days before, emailed the sister from the ship with photographs of herself in the library. She had been looking forward. Linnea had also not been physically capable of climbing over the balcony rail in a way that would leave no trace. She had also, the sister added, not been the kind of person who would have opened her cabin door to a stranger in the middle of the Atlantic. And yet, Linnea had entered her cabin at 9:34. Approximately 13 hours and 41 minutes later, the cabin was empty. Some mechanism had removed her. Neither the cabin door nor the balcony, according to the electronic records of the vessel, had been the path of exit. The sister did not know what the path of exit had been. In closing her email to me, she explained that she had come to believe her sister was not in the sea. She did not have a theory about where her sister was. She had simply concluded, over the preceding 2 years, that the sea was not the place she had been taken. The sister included in her correspondence a photograph. The photograph had been taken by Linnea with her phone on the afternoon of the day she disappeared. The image depicts Linnea seated in the library of the New Statendam. She is reading the collection of essays by E.B. White that was subsequently found on her bedside table. She is wearing a pale blue cardigan and reading glasses. The photograph was time-stamped at 2:47 in the afternoon. Linnea had sent it to her sister with a short message saying she was enjoying the book and that the library was quieter than she had expected. The sister told me, in her email, that she had looked at the photograph many times during the 2 years since. She had looked at it until she could describe every object in the frame from memory. She had looked at it for evidence of something wrong. She had not found any. Linnea had been, at 2:47 on the afternoon of her last day, an ordinary woman reading a book. The cabin steward had reported no change in Linnea's mood between that afternoon and her return to her cabin that evening. The corridor camera footage, which had been preserved from the final hour of Linnea's day, showed her walking down the corridor toward her cabin at 9:33. She was walking normally. She was carrying a small cloth handbag. She was, as far as the footage could communicate, not in any distress. She entered her cabin. The door closed. That was the last image of her. The sister asked me in the email if I had any idea what had happened. I told her I did not. I told her I had reviewed the materials she had sent and the materials I had obtained through the public records process, and that the case, in the forensic and investigative data, resembled the other cases in this investigation. I told her that the pattern did not admit of a conventional explanation. She wrote back a few days later, thanking me. A conventional explanation was not what she had expected. She had, by the time of our correspondence, already stopped expecting one. What she had wanted, she told me in her second email, was to know that she was not the only one asking the question. She was glad to know that other people were asking it too. The 12th case is still open. The family has asked that I not describe it in the detail I have described the preceding 11. I can tell you that it occurred in November of 2024, aboard a Royal Caribbean vessel on a 7-day Eastern Caribbean itinerary out of Port Canaveral, Florida. The subject was a 33-year-old woman from Central Florida, a physical therapist by profession, traveling with her husband. She entered her cabin on the 10th deck of the vessel at 11:51 in the evening on the 4th night of the voyage. Her husband was asleep. The cabin door was not recorded as opening again until approximately 6:30 the following morning, when her husband woke and realized she was not beside him. Her belongings were in the cabin. Her phone was on the bedside table charged, connected to the vessel's cellular network. Her wallet was in the drawer where she habitually placed it. Her medications, including a routine asthma inhaler she had carried since childhood, were in the bathroom cabinet, the inhaler approximately half full. Her key card was on the dresser. The ship's internal search, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the subsequent Royal Caribbean review of surveillance and detection system logs were conducted according to standard protocol. The results of those reviews were, per the pattern, consistent with the preceding 11 cases. The Man Overboard detection system had been in normal operation throughout the night. The environmental log showed a 4-minute window of reduced sensor reporting beginning at approximately 2:50 in the morning, which the cruise line's engineering team has attributed to a brief atmospheric interference event, details of which are under review. The husband, who had been asleep, has no recollection of any noise, movement, or activity in the cabin during that window. He has not, according to the family's attorney, been named as a person of interest. He has cooperated fully with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He has submitted to a polygraph examination, which he is reported to have passed. He has been, throughout the month since his wife's disappearance, the person most actively seeking answers from the cruise line and from the federal authorities. She has not been recovered. The family filed a civil action in April of 2025 in the United States District Court for the Southern District of Florida. The case carries a federal docket number, beginning with the characters indicating a 2025 Miami filing. The docket is publicly available. The filings are, with the exception of the initial complaint and the jurisdictional response, sealed pending resolution. The case seeks declaratory judgment on the question of whether the cruise line's Man Overboard detection system was operating within the contracted service specifications on the night of the disappearance. It also seeks unsealing of the vessel's full maintenance log for a 72-hour window surrounding the event. As of this investigation, the carrier has moved to dismiss on jurisdictional and admiralty preemption grounds. The motion has not been ruled on. The family has asked, while it remains pending, that I not identify her by name or by further detail. 12 cases is enough to sit with the pattern. The pattern, to be clear, did not assemble itself in a single sitting. It accumulated. The Man Overboard detection system is engineered to see a falling human body within 1/10 of a second. In 12 of 12 cases, it saw nothing. 12 times. 0 alerts. 4 technical systems recorded the presence and movements of each of these 12 subjects aboard their respective vessels. The key card swipe system, the corridor camera network, the Man Overboard detection system, the balcony and exterior deck motion sensor array. These systems are, collectively, designed to make it impossible for a person to disappear from a modern cruise ship. A ship underway in international waters is, from the perspective of a person wishing to vanish without a trace, one of the worst possible environments to attempt such a disappearance. The vessel is a sealed container. Every entry and exit to every controlled space is logged. Every corridor is watched. Every rail is monitored. The sea outside is photographed continuously. And yet, in each of these 12 cases, the subject boarded the vessel, moved through its monitored spaces, entered a controlled area, and then ceased to be recorded by any of the systems, while the systems continued to operate. In every case, the conclusion of the cruise line's internal review was that the subject must have gone overboard. In every case, the conclusion was reached despite the absence of any physical evidence that an overboard event had occurred. The simplest explanation, if we accept it, is that the detection systems are imperfect. They miss events. They fail in specific ways that make a determined person capable of going overboard in a manner the systems do not register. The Celebrity Equinox engineer's deposition, which I quoted earlier, suggested that the systems have predictable windows of reduced capability, and that those windows are exploited by anyone inclined to exploit them. This explanation is internally consistent. It accounts for the statistical pattern. It is also, on its face, absurd. It requires that 12 adults, over a span of 26 years, independently identified system vulnerabilities that have not been publicly disclosed, timed their actions to exploit them, and chose to disappear during those specific windows. It requires that none of them left any communication, any indication of intent, any consistent profile with other suicide cases. It requires that they did this from across different cruise lines, different vessels, different itineraries, different itinerary nights. The second explanation is that some portion of these cases involves external actors, human traffickers, criminal networks, predators operating on the vessel itself, or with coordinated access through crew. The Amy Bradley case, with its more than 20-year history of reported sightings, and the recent Federal Bureau of Investigation identification of persons of interest with trafficking connections, provides a clear reference point for this explanation. The George Smith case, with its blood pattern on the balcony and the corridor camera outage, provides a reference point for homicide. This explanation is more disturbing, but also more empirically tractable. It accounts for many of the features of the pattern. It does not account, however, for all of them. It does not account for the multi-axis motion event in Corey Blanchard's case, which was consistent with a body propelled outward with external force, but which was registered in the middle of the Caribbean with no plausible outside vessel in the vicinity. It does not account for Lana Whitaker's disappearance from a sealed cabin in the middle of the Atlantic with no recorded cabin door opening. It does not account, in the totality of the 12 cases, for the consistent and precise coincidence of disappearance with momentary system vulnerability. The third explanation is that the pattern itself is an artifact of selection bias. Cruise ship disappearances occur at a low but not zero rate. Most of them are probably ordinary overboard events that are not detected because the Man Overboard detection systems are not 100% sensitive. Some smaller number may involve foul play. The 12 cases I have described are simply the ones where the absence of clear explanation has attracted investigative attention. Behind them, there is no unified pattern. There is only a statistical residue of cases that happen to share superficial features. This explanation is the most conservative. It is also, in my assessment, the least consistent with the evidence. The 12 cases share features that go well beyond the superficial. The timing of the disappearances within the itinerary, the specific timestamps within the night, the consistent presence of a momentary system vulnerability at or near the moment of disappearance, the pattern of personal effects left behind, the repeated detail of the book left open, face down, with the subject having intended to return within minutes, the repeated detail of the key card left behind in the cabin, the phone left behind, the wallet left behind. These details are not superficial. They are, collectively, a description of a subject who was in the middle of an ordinary routine when something interrupted that routine, in a way the subject did not anticipate and could not prepare for. The question, if you accept the pattern as real, is what produces an interruption of that kind on a vessel designed to make interruptions impossible. The Federal Bureau of Investigation has not, to my knowledge, identified a pattern across these 12 cases in any public document. The individual cases are, at the Bureau, handled by different field offices depending on the vessel's last port of call or the family's place of residence. There is no dedicated unit within the Bureau that cross-references cruise ship disappearance cases for common characteristics. The Cruise Vessel Security and Safety Act, which governs reporting of missing persons from cruise vessels, requires that incidents be reported individually. It does not require, nor does it currently provide for, cross-incident pattern analysis. The United States Coast Guard, which is the other federal agency with jurisdiction over cruise ship incidents in international waters, maintains its own search and rescue records for overboard events. Those records are not, to my knowledge, integrated with the Federal Bureau of Investigation records of missing person reports. The Coast Guard searches after an overboard event has been confirmed. It does not typically search for a missing passenger whose overboard event has not been confirmed, because by the time the ship notifies the Coast Guard, the vessel has typically already completed the last known position search and concluded that the subject is not recoverable. The cases I have described, in which the Man Overboard detection system did not trigger, are cases in which the Coast Guard is generally not involved. The disappearance is investigated as an onshore matter after the vessel returns to port. The cruise industry itself, as a collective, does not make public the statistical characteristics of its missing person reports. The Cruise Lines International Association, which represents the major carriers, does not publish aggregate data on missing person incidents. Individual carriers make their own quarterly reports to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Those reports are subsequently aggregated into a public data release by the Department of Transportation. The release is available for download from the department's website. It contains, for the most recent quarter, the ship name, the itinerary, and a one-line classification of the incident. It does not contain narrative descriptions, timestamps, detection system data, or investigative conclusions. A researcher interested in the pattern has to reconstruct it from other sources, which is what the last 14 months of my work and the previous several years of work by maritime attorneys representing the families have been about. What I have reconstructed is what I have just given you. I have been asked, during the correspondence that supported this investigation, what I believe is happening on these vessels. I have been asked the question by every family I have communicated with. I have been asked the question by the 2 former ship security officers who spoke to me on the condition that they not be named. I have been asked the question by the maritime attorney who assisted me with access to civil settlement documents. I will answer it here with the same answer I gave each of them. I do not know what is happening on these vessels. I know only what the evidence describes. The evidence describes 12 adults, over a span of 26 years, who boarded cruise vessels of various carriers, participated in the ordinary routine of a cruise voyage, entered a controlled space on the vessel at a recorded time, and then ceased to be visible to any monitoring system the vessel operates. The evidence describes, in at least 7 of the 12 cases, a specific and narrow window of reduced monitoring coincident with the subject's disappearance. The evidence describes personal effects consistent with a subject in the middle of an ordinary activity, interrupted. The evidence describes the absence, across all 12 cases, of any body, any confirmed sighting, any financial trace, any digital trace, any subsequent communication. The evidence describes, in the aggregate, a pattern that does not conform to conventional explanations of cruise ship disappearance as overboard accident, suicide, or isolated criminal act. If your mother boarded a ship and did not come home, if your father boarded a ship and did not come home, if your wife, your husband, your daughter, your son boarded, and the cruise line told you they had fallen overboard, and you have asked to see the Man Overboard detection log from that night, and been told the log was unavailable, or it was released to you with the minutes around the disappearance missing, or it was released to you with a classification of environmental anomaly attached to the exact window in which your loved one disappeared, then the pattern I have just described is a pattern that includes your family. The logs exist. They are accessible through a civil discovery process. The Cruise Vessel Security and Safety Act preserves them for a minimum of the voyage, plus 60 days, and in practice many carriers preserve them longer under the terms of standing commercial contracts with their detection system vendors. A family member with access to an attorney experienced in maritime personal injury law can obtain the logs. The logs will show, for the night of the disappearance, the state of the vessel's monitoring systems. They will show any gap, any outage, any scheduled maintenance window, any algorithmic flag that the vessel's investigators may not have emphasized in the internal report. Write to this channel through the email in the description. Tell me the name of the vessel. Tell me the night. I will, with your permission, review the log against the pattern described here. and I will share what I find with the other families in this investigation who have agreed to cooperate, and with the maritime attorney who has been instrumental in the research that supported these findings. I will not share your identifying information without your explicit consent. The cases will, in all likelihood, continue to occur. The vessels will continue to sail. The Man Overboard detection systems will continue to operate within their design specifications and will continue to miss whatever they are missing. The families will continue to settle their civil actions under non-disclosure agreements that prevent them from speaking publicly about the details. The Federal Bureau of Investigation will continue to handle each case individually, under the jurisdictional framework it currently applies. Sometimes, perhaps every few years, one of the cases will surface. A Netflix documentary, a podcast, a magazine article, a family member who has chosen, for reasons of their own, to speak. When one of the cases surfaces, it is treated as an isolated event, a tragedy, an unsolved vanishing at sea. The ship, the carrier, the itinerary are remembered for a few weeks and then forgotten. The other 11 remain invisible. The vessel continues to sail. The detection system continues to monitor. The gap windows continue to recur. On the night I write this, somewhere in the Caribbean or the Mediterranean or the Eastern Pacific, an adult passenger has just entered her cabin at a time recorded by the key card swipe system. She has put her phone on the bedside table. She has placed her book on the bed, spine up, face down, with the intention of returning to read it in a few minutes. She is, at this moment, doing an ordinary thing that several million other passengers are also doing tonight on approximately 200 other active cruise vessels around the world. Almost all of those passengers will, tomorrow morning, open their books and continue reading. She is, statistically, almost certainly one of them. But a small number of passengers, on a small number of vessels, over a small number of nights, do not open the book in the morning. The book remains where it was placed. The bookmark, if it was used, remains in place. The cabin is empty. The detection system has recorded nothing that the bridge officer is inclined to flag. The vessel continues on its itinerary. The family is informed at the next port. The civil action is filed. The settlement is reached. The non-disclosure agreement is signed. The case is added to the quarterly report the Department of Transportation will publish next year, with a one-line classification and no narrative. I will, for the rest of my career, continue to look at those quarterly reports. I will compare them against the pattern. I will correspond with families. I will file public records requests. I will read the logs that are produced in response. I will assemble the next investigation from the data I can access. I will not, I suspect, reach a satisfying conclusion. The conclusion, whatever it is, will not be of the kind that resolves. It will be of the kind that accumulates. Each case that fits the pattern, added to the pattern, will make the pattern more visible. At some point, I hope, visible enough that a federal agency or a congressional committee or a maritime safety organization will be moved to look at it as a pattern. I do not know when that point will be reached. I know only that the pattern is larger than the 12 cases I have described. I know that for every case I have found in the public record, or through the cooperation of a family, there are others I have not found, either because their families did not wish to participate, or because the civil settlement prevented them from speaking, or because the cruise line's internal review classified the case in a way that made it invisible in the Department of Transportation's quarterly report. The 12 I have described are what the evidence allowed me to describe. They are, I believe, a fraction. I do not know what fraction. If you have cruised on any of the vessels I have named in this investigation, you have, statistically, been fine. Your cruise ship did not attempt to end your life. The detection systems that did not detect whatever happened to Amy Bradley in 1998, or George Smith in 2005, or Rebecca Corum in 2011, or Diane Hollis in 2013, or Laurel Witmore in 2016, or Frank Delaney in 2017, or Corey Blanchard in 2019, or Hannah Brennan in 2021, or Lana Whitaker in 2023, were probably working normally on the night you sailed. The odds of being one of the small number of passengers who encounter whatever it is that encounters people in the gap windows are, for a single passenger on a single voyage, vanishingly small. This is not a warning. This is not a suggestion that you cancel your next cruise. The cruise industry is, statistically, a safe form of travel. Millions of passengers return from their voyages each year without incident. This is, rather, an observation. Over the past 26 years, adults have been boarding cruise ships in American ports, completing a portion of their voyages, and then disappearing from the ships at a rate that the vessel's own detection systems have been unable to account for. The pattern is specific. The pattern is consistent. The pattern is invisible in any single one of its component cases, because each component case has its own story, its own cruise line, its own investigation, its own civil settlement. The pattern emerges only when the cases are laid side by side, and when they are laid side by side, the pattern suggests something that does not fit the conventional categories of overboard accident, suicide, or homicide. I do not have a name for the category that fits the pattern. I have, over the past several months, worked on a draft of a submission I may eventually make to the Government Accountability Office, requesting a federal review of the Cruise Vessel Security and Safety Act's reporting provisions and their adequacy in capturing cross-incident patterns of the kind this investigation has described. Whether I submit the draft is a decision I have not yet made. The submission, if I make it, will not include any information that identifies any of the families whose cooperation has made the investigation possible. It will include the 12 cases as I have described them here, with the adjustments to names and minor details that the families have requested. It will include the pattern as I have assembled it. It will propose that the Act be amended to require cross-incident pattern analysis, and that such analysis be made publicly available in a redacted form that protects family privacy while permitting independent review. Whether the Accountability Office would act on such a submission, I do not know. The office has a mandate to investigate federal programs. Whether the reporting provisions of the Cruise Vessel Security and Safety Act rise to the level of a federal program subject to such investigation is a question the office would have to decide for itself. I have been advised by a former staff investigator that the odds of a successful submission prompting a formal review are low, but that the odds of a submission being entered into the public record and thereby becoming available to subsequent researchers are nearly certain. For this reason alone, the submission may be worth making. Tomorrow morning, if you are on a cruise ship, I want you to do one thing. Go to the deck of the vessel, whichever deck you are on, and stand at the rail. Look down. Measure, with your eye, the distance from the rail to the water. If you are on deck 7 of a typical modern cruise vessel, the distance is approximately 60 feet. The fall time from the rail to the water, under normal gravity, is approximately 2 seconds. The Man Overboard detection system is designed to register that fall. It is designed to measure the motion signature of a falling human body against the algorithmic profile the manufacturer has established. It is designed to raise an alarm on the bridge, in the security office, and in the detection system control room within 1/10 of a second of the registration. The system is designed to be faster than the fall. The system is designed to see what you would not see if you were on the rail beside the falling person. The system is designed, in other words, to be a witness that cannot be fooled. The system, in these 12 cases, has been fooled. The system has missed what it was designed to detect. The system, in some of the cases, has registered something and misclassified it. In other cases, the system has been offline during the precise window in which it should have been watching. In still other cases, the system has operated normally and has simply not registered anything, because whatever happened was not the kind of thing the system was designed to detect. Look at the rail. Look at the water below. Consider what happens in the gap between them for the handful of adults per year, for whom that gap is the last thing they see. The pattern I have described, you may now return to.